yesterday, my wife told me, okay, I've made fun of you for this, but I think for the first time I can see that these tools are making you a better husband.
Oh, wow.
There's no such thing as AGI. AGI sits nicely in books and science fiction books and the things like that. There's no such thing as AGI. AGI is not coming. Think about it. Whether generative AI is going to be is a better model an opportunity or a threat for your business? If a better model is an opportunity for your business, you're in the right business. If a better model is a threat, then you're in the wrong business because that better model is going to wipe you out someday. I think the reason why a lot of people are sort of getting a little concerned with the LLMs and taking away jobs is the kind of jobs it's coming for. It's not manual, unskilled jobs that it's coming for.
It's cognitive labor.
LLM in some sense, as they say, is represents the average knowledge of the internet. Yeah. Where you think you're above average, you do your stuff. Where you think you're below average or you're too bored to bother, you just use the LLM. You're at least making index returns in this. Yep. ChatGPT is not going to make you money, it's going to help you make money.
How dare you? There are people who are saying that ChatGPT make money. Make no mistake.
Hello and welcome to this conversation about all things AI, and I hope it's more about what we misunderstand about AI than what we understand AI. And to do that, we have with us Karthik. I've known Karthik through social media for more than a decade now. I think I first came across your name on Mint when you used to write there, and then over time, figured out that you are not just about finance and quant, and there's a lot more that you do. So with that, let me just ask you to tell us more about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Great, thanks. I'm Karthik Shashidhar. I'm a data and AI consultant based in Bangalore. So for last 2.5 years, I'd been running my own AI native company called Babbage Insight. And before that, and including that, for the last about 15 years, I've been largely working in and around data science and analytics and AI. I was even earlier running my own consulting practice for about 8-9 years. Then I headed data science and analytics for Delivery, the logistics company, for about 3 years. Then ran Babbage, and now I'm back to being a consultant.
Also, you have one of the coolest usernames, Noenthuda.
Noenthuda is not on Twitter. Is my blog. So noenthuda.com, now hosted at noenthuda.substack.com.
What's the story? I always laugh when I...
So this was basically, it was how my friends would make fun of me because I was always reluctant. Sometimes somebody would be like, hey, let's go to Madras to attend this quiz. Right. And I'd be like, Noenthuda. Come, let's play AOE. Noenthuda. And so that phrase got stuck to me, and people started, it's called NED, so we ran this thing called NED Talks at home for a few years. And yeah, that became my blog, my Substack handle. Twitter, I'm at a very decent Karthikes. But by the way, since you're a brokerage, I need to talk about this. I have a bit of a background in finance. I worked for a few years, I worked as a quant, among other places at Goldman Sachs. So for me, if you say finance, I'll be like ds by s equal to mu ds plus sigma dw. I mean, that's how I look at the finance world.
Yeah, 8 people will get that reference, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's fine.
And all my money is in index funds and things like that. So I'm not from your world in that sense. Also related to finance, I wrote a column for Mint for about 6-7 years. Started by, in some sense, I was among India's, without calling myself that, I was probably among India's earliest data journalists, if you were to call it that.
I would have told you that any which ways.
And Sukumar, the editor of Mint, once called me the Nate Silver of India. So because I used to write a lot about elections and about cricket and things like that. So he's like...
You still have that model on your GitHub, the election prediction.
I still have that. I mean, it's still... I did not revive it for the 2024 elections. But yeah, now that I'm doing my own thing again, you can expect more activity on my GitHub. And also, thanks to generative AI, if you look at my GitHub's commit...
The tiles, yeah.
You'll see last 3 months is insanely dense. Yeah. Then before that, I was sort of recovering from Babbage, so you'll see a white patch.
Yeah.
Second half of last year was, again, while I was CEO of the company, again, insanely dense because I was committing code every single day as part of my company. And before that, almost entirely white. So I think gives you a sense of how sort of generative AI is enabling everything, including data science, which is my chosen field.
And yeah, about the book, how did that happen?
Oh, the book, yeah, I forgot to mention. Yeah. It's called Between the Buyer and the Seller. So basically, I think, one of the things that I end up doing a lot is sort of take ideas from one domain and put it into another domain. So there was this period of time somewhere between 2013 and 2015, I think, where I could not unsee liquidity. I'm like, hey, I'm finding it difficult to find a job. That's because you're too illiquid. And I'm not able to find good cheeses in Bangalore. This was before Swiggy, Instamart and stuff. That's because the market for cheese in Bangalore is illiquid. And again, I come from a capital markets background and things like that. So I could not unsee liquidity from anywhere I looked. And then I was like, okay, this is a very different threat to everything else I've been writing. By the way, I've been a blogger for 22 years at Noenthuda. Started in 2004.
You're one of the earliest XYZ in a lot of senses in India.
Yes, I'm one of the earliest bloggers, one of the earliest data journalists. I was working from home before it was cool. And so when COVID happened, in the first month of COVID lockdown, I think Times of India interviewed me 3 times to talk about what it is like to work from home and things like that, because I was doing the portfolio life starting in 2011, much before anyone else, because that's when I wrote my book, did my consulting, taught at IIMB, did public policy research with Takshila. So it's like and then one more thing, I was doing gig economy before Uber had come to India and things like that. So I've there are way too many things that I think I've done well before anyone else has done.
Unfortunately, always well before.
I don't know, unfortunately or fortunately, because in most of the cases, I think I've had fun doing these things. And whether it's, I don't know, like it's and I had a lot of fun. So in some cases, I'm like, I could have probably done this a little later, but absolutely no regrets.
Like, speaking of liquidity, like, it reminds me, I don't know if you know this, Tyler Cohen on Marginal Revolution here, that markets in everything. So he had this funny example where there's a small fish, which apparently goes into the mouth of some larger fish, cleans out its teeth. Yeah. In return, it gets food. And the bigger fish doesn't swallow the smaller fish. Yes. So this is a good example of a market.
Markets in everything, yeah, exactly.
It reminded me
another of my finance inspirations. This guy called Matt Levine, who I guess most of your listeners will be reading his newsletter. And he had, around the time I started writing my book, he used to have this one section in his column, which was like, something like everything is about bond market liquidity. That was back then. It was bond market liquidity. Now it became securities fraud. Then now off late it comes to my inbox every day, but most days I don't read it. But I think it went to crypto and all of this. But back in the day, it was all about everything is about bond market liquidity. And one of my high points was when I think 2016. My blog was the leading story on Matt Levine's newsletter.
Ooh, nice.
Wow.
I have forgotten what I have. I think I've forgotten what this was about. I'll give you the link so that you can put it below this podcast. But yes, that was one of the earliest sort of one of my So I've done a lot of things well before they were cool and things like that. So
one of the reasons. So I've been a long time reader of your blog. I think I only interacted with you once on Twitter. Long back. Like I loved everything you wrote on Mint. Like one of the reasons why I was excited about having this conversation was twofold. One, like this AI, like we were speaking earlier, AI has become a thing. Whether you hate it, whether you like it, it's here to stay. And the second thing is, there's a lot of, for the lack of a better word, BS around AI. There's a lot of mysticism. On the one hand, you have doomers, on the have boosters, then you have the grifters. It's becoming very hard for you, for a lot of people to make sense of what this thing exactly is. So one of my ideas was the inspiration for this conversation was to speak to people who actually use it and people who kind of straddle multiple words. So you've been a quant, you've been a writer, you are a data scientist in the truest sense of the word. Before you dive deep, like since let's say November 23, when ChatGPT launched. 22.
Yeah.
There was a trough of disillusionment, then we recovered. I want to ask you, like, how did you go about making sense of this technology? Like you were skeptical earlier, you're an early adopter. What did that process look like?
We just spoke about how I was early to everything. Yeah. Generative AI is one thing which am, with benefit of hindsight, I've been a little late to.
Okay. Is there a reason?
I think the reason is that the moment I saw, I still remember 1st December 22 was when I think overnight ChatGPT had been launched. I mean, GPT-3 had come a couple of years earlier, but ChatGPT launched, and then suddenly everybody was only talking about it. I had just come back from a holiday, logged into Twitter, and like only thing people were talking about was this ChatGPT, and I'm like, for the previous 8-9 years, there had been a business idea that had been brewing in my head in terms of giving automated insights from structured data. I mean, that's how I called it then. It evolved. But then I was like, this is a good time to now we have the right technology to do this in a generic fashion. Until now, if I had to do this, the cost of software engineering would have been way too high. And so I was like, I want to start this company. So within the first month of ChatGPT coming out, I was like, I want to start this company. This is a company that became Babbage Insight a year later. So which meant that I think I was looking at generative AI with blinkers for the longest time, because I was like, I was only looking at generative AI from the point of view of how can I use this to do better data science, how can I use this to build out this product that I've been looking to build out and things like that. So ironically, because I became an AI entrepreneur, I have been a late adopter to AI, because now in the last 6 months, after we decided to wind down the company, now I'm in some sense I've gotten freed up to actually appreciate the joys of AI rather than just looking at it as a tool which is the bedrock of my business. And so now I'm having a lot more fun with it and doing a lot of other interesting things with it, including data science in a much better manner than I did when I was actually running the company based on this platform.
So a lot of people have tough time adjusting it, like for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's because they have wrong incentives. Some people feel inherently threatened, saying that, dude, this thing will take away my job. I don't want to train my replacement. Or some people are just plain oblivious to the fact that there's this tool even. Yep. Like I kind of come across all sorts of people. Like, but when you had to make that shift from, okay, this is a tool which I had not seen, I had not seen generative AI, then it suddenly become a thing that's both helping me have fun, at the same time helping on the business side. Did you find it harder to make that adjustment?
See, I think initially I resisted. I mean, I embraced the concept of generative AI. I knew very quickly that this can be really good. But I think initially I was not very receptive to the idea that this can be absolutely life-changing in terms of all kinds of business and things like that. Or let's just taking the whole only domain of data science. I still remember when we were writing the first few lines of code for Babbage 2 years ago. I'm like, hey, let me just test this ChatGPT. Let me give it a few samples of data and ask it to clean it. Right. I was like, I took the 4 lines of a large CSV, copied, pasted it to ChatGPT, said, give me Python code to clean this data. It gave me code and it didn't run because ChatGPT was giving me code that was based on Python 2.7 and the syntax had changed from then to 3.11, which was what I had on my computer. And suddenly I'm like, okay, this is not good. Yeah. It's useless. We need to, all the more reasons for us to build out our company and things like that. So I think I started there. By the way, like right in the beginning, I remember looking at this seeing this in a podcast. I forget where this was, 23, I think, which was where the person said something like, think about it, whether generative AI is going to be is a better model an opportunity or a threat for your business. If a better model is an opportunity for your business, you're in the right business. If a better model is a threat, then you're in the wrong business, because that better model is going to wipe you out someday. Yeah. So while I had that at the back of my mind, because of my early experiences, where it wasn't very good at what I was asking it to do and things like that, I remained a skeptic, and I think I remained a skeptic for much longer than I should have been, with full benefit of hindsight. Because if I had noticed the trends a little earlier, I would have probably started using it for more things and for better things and so on. So there's no such thing as AGI. AGI sits nicely in books and science fiction books and the things like that. There's no such thing as AGI. AGI is not coming. Maybe OpenAI decided to pull a fast one by putting that in their shareholder agreement and things like that.
It was a nice narrative pump.
And even every few days, people will be like, oh, Cloud Opus is AGI. Yeah. Opus 4.8 is AGI. ChatGPT 5.5 is AGI. That short-lived fable which came out last week, that is AGI and things like that. Because people are like, this does things that I would not have expected a machine to do. Still, it's matrix. It's matrix multiplication. It's entire. So whenever somebody says, like, or rather I would say it's linear algebra. Artificial intelligence makes you think it's some sentient being that's sitting inside your computer, sitting in some server somewhere and doing some magic. But if you think replace artificial intelligence wherever you see with linear algebra, then you know what it actually is about.
Linear algebra on scale, on steroids.
At massive scale and steroids, right? I mean, think about the kind of, like recently a company Cerebras went IPO. Mm-hmm. Their whole thing is a chip that can do much better and faster inference of large language models. Mm-hmm. In that sense, it's like matrix multiplication at massive scale and steroids, and it's created its own steroids, like your Cerebras. Like OpenAI, I think they use Cerebras fairly heavily for their fast more inferences and things like that. So it's So it's created its own markets and so on.
You saying there's no thing ages. I was listening to this person called Benedict Evans. I don't know if you've heard of him. Like he had this nice quote at the start of his slide. AJ is any technology that doesn't work yet.
But then by that definition, it means that like the moment it starts working, now is that AGI or not? I mean,
So
like,
he was the same example you said. Like, so is machine learning AI? Because AI was everything which is not working yet. Like they.
no, actually, thinking about machine learning, right? First, when I came across machine learning in terms of like just simple image recognition and things like that, initially it was like I thought it was magic, and then over a period of time, I think with a few good conversations with some fairly people smarter than me, I figured that okay, it's not magic; it's just matrix multiplication, and it's matrix multiplication at different scales. So in some sense, yeah, if a high schooler were to come and say that, hey, I'm interested in maths, which branch of maths do you think is sort of like going to be the most impactful? I'll now tell them linear algebra. I might have told them calculus or something like that, or trigonometry or something a few years ago. But now with full benefit of hindsight, linear algebra is the underpinning of everything.
Going back to your, like, not to belabor this point, but going back to your earlier experience as a quant, like if I remember, as an outsider, from whatever little I know, the finance people were one of the earliest adopters of all things machine learning.
Yes.
There was this, I mean, vaguely, roughly, I remember from, let's say, 2012 to 16, there was this like entire machine learning will do everything. We have like massive reservoirs of hidden alpha that machine learning will give us. You are doing this much before this was even a thing. Like machine learning never crossed your radar as when you were doing when you were in finance.
Funnily enough, it didn't, because I was again I was in the pretty much entirely working on the stochastic calculus side of things, right? We were using stochastic calculus for how do you unwind a large trade. Use stochastic calculus for something. I did remember using machine learning briefly, but it was not the alpha wasn't that much.
There was no hidden waterfall of alpha.
There was no hidden waterfall of alpha. I know that you have a lot of quant funds which employ a lot of fairly high-powered machine learning engineers and things like that, and who famously refuse to hire people with a finance background and so on. So there is obviously there is some alpha, but somehow I never discovered that alpha. Also, it might be due to my personal baggage of how I learned statistics, which was like you need to inspect the data before you build a model. Machine learning goes against that. So it took me, if I'm a late adopter to generative AI, net, I was an even later adopter of machine learning itself, because it took me a long time to come around. Like, okay, sometimes the dimensionality can be so large that you can't actually inspect the data and you have to sort of
trust the
Go.
There's a nice XKCD about pour all the data into this pile of linear algebra, and the answer will come out on the other side. Somebody asks, what if the answer is you don't like the answer? Says, stir the pile. Even now, as of today, my Twitter bio says expert in stirring the pile of data. So it's basically that. So,
but like because you're a data scientist and you're an actual data scientist, unlike people who just put it in their Twitter bios, and that's one area where, like at least in the limited experience that I have, AI kind of shines. It pays for itself. Is it revolutionary in the sense that this thing reduces the need for data analysis? Does this open the door for now analyzing larger data sets, which otherwise wasn't really feasible prior to this? Like, how does that change life for people who kind of interact with data in a very broadest sense?
got it. Actually, let me broaden your question. I think the place where generative AI has had the most impact is in coding. And in some sense, parts of data science overlap with parts of software engineering. And so, if to that extent, it has massively revolutionized data science. Because the thing with coding and what makes LLM so good at it is that it's verifiable. So think about it. Go back to the time when you first learned programming, is that you write a program and then you run it. First you compile it. It doesn't compile, it gives an error. Then you go back and check the program. You do that 20 different times. Then you run it and you find that like, whatever, it's run out of memory or it gives the wrong output. Again, another 100 times, you keep running it, keep tweaking it and so on. Because it is deterministic output. You know what you're working towards. The goal is very, very certain of a computer program. So which means that you can iterate. Right. And now with the harnesses that people have built around LLMs, with things like your Claude Code or Codex and Cursor and all those, you are able to iterate. You are able to, so which makes LLMs very, very good for software engineering and coding and things like that. And for data science, like I'll tell you, if I were to sort of build a data science team today, for the same task, I would probably, if I would have hired maybe 15 people 5 years ago, I'll maybe hire 3 or 4 people now.
I was about to ask you this anyway.
Because a lot of when you think of data science, you think of like this sort of what I'll call as high funder work. You'll be like, oh, you'll be building models all day and things like that. But there's also a lot of other work, which is like somebody has built some model, you need to maintain it, make sure that it gives the right results.
Very boring things.
Very boring things. Or you need to build a model for something slightly different. So you take one existing SQL query and you have to slightly modify it to fit the new reality and things like that. Again, laborious task. One statement can lead to be hundreds and thousands of lines, almost impossible to debug and things like that, which means you need to hire people just for these tasks and so on. These are things that LLMs are reasonably good at, given the right context. I mean, how you give the context, how you engineer it goes a long way in this process. But given the right context, LLMs are fairly good at things like, hey, I have this model for A, can you extend it to B? Excellent. Here is my repository of SQL queries. Now give me a query for this particular, I don't know, like returns to scale or something of that sort. It'll do that. Like so all the sort of the auxiliary tasks that an LLM that you needed to do, that an LLM does much better and much faster. And so that kind of makes things reduces the need. The way I think about it, I mean, I don't know, like when you first used MS Paint, when it came out, it was called Paintbrush in Windows 3.1, which is when I first used it. I'm dating myself, but like there's this one feature where, let's say you would have drawn a shape, you click inside that and it fills that with a particular color.
Yeah, the fill tool. Yeah.
The fill tool. LLM is a great fill tool. Earlier you were like, I need to build a login page. Okay, which tool do I integrate? Can I build the login page myself and all? Now you just tell the LLM, build me a login page. It just does it. Like very, so all the sort of straightforward components of everything that you need to do. Now that we are in, I'm talking to you guys in this office. LLMs are brilliant. The market component. I have a blog post which says LLMs are beta. Right. Like it's
that was the post which I love the framing. Just can you just talk a little bit about it also?
LLMs are beta and LLMs are indices. I mean, these are two things that relevant to Zerodha. I mean, the stuff that I've written. Like, so think about it. I mean, markets. If you think about it, there's like I mentioned, like all my money is in index funds. So which means that whatever returns I get is basically 1x beta or whatever, some linear combination of whatever indices I put it in. I put no effort trying to outperform the market. I'm like, market gives the returns, I'm good. I'm happy with that. I'm pretty sure most of your investors and traders are like, they are not happy. They are in the business because they don't want to accept just the beta. They want alpha.
No, they're in the business of trying to make Warren Buffett look like a fool.
Well, I mean, you know them better than I do. But like from the outside, I'm like, okay, but whatever it is, they all want to do alpha. So, which means that they're like, index returns are not enough for us. We need more than it. And here is some 20 different clever things. This is why I'm cleverer than you. So I'm hoping to make more money than you and things like that. Now think about it from the point of view of, let's say you're building a system using LLMs. There's a whole bunch of components for which, in some sense, there is an index that represents that component. So you think about it, you'll have a financials index and a metals index and a consumer index and so on. And as a linear, and you want a particular bespoke exposure, and it's a linear combination of these indices will give you that exposure. Now imagine a time before you had these indices. If you are like, I need 40% metals exposure, you're like, okay, 40% metals, which stocks do I put my money in what proportion? And you would have to break your head on that. Now you are just, okay, there's this particular metals index, I'm just going to put 40% of my money in that. Very easy. Now think about it from the point of view of LLMs. There's a whole bunch of the work that you do in anything. That's sort of repeatable stuff that other people have done several times, which means LLMs are very good at it because they basically they learn from existing data and things
so
like
represented
that.
In the training data. Yeah,
it's quite fairly. So things like build me a login page, very well represented. Now I can tell you, in 2026 I can tell you, clean this data set, pretty good. 2024 it was pretty bad. But these are all things that, or write this, this is my bank of 100 SQL queries, write this 101st query. LLMs are very good and things like that. So these are all like beta stuff, which is like, there's no alpha in writing this, but the people who are in the job of producing alpha would have to do this earlier because like it was a necessary part of their entire thing.
So it shifted the frontier, so to speak.
shifted the frontier. A lot of things became tools, a lot of things became components, and LLMs make it very easy to plug in these components into your systems, because that whole LLMs are excellent system integrators in some sense to again bring a sectoral to bring a sectoral perspective to this, because they're like earlier you were like, okay, the OAuth has built this nice authentication. How do I integrate it into my software? You'll be reading like documentation for some 1 week and take another 2 weeks to implement
Now
that.
you have a peasant you can hand it off to.
Yes, you just hand it off to, and like it has this knowledge, so it's able to integrate very, very quickly. So all the beta stuff is done by LLMs. Now, slightly changing fields. Think about it in terms of LLM in some sense, as I say, is like represents the average knowledge of the internet.
Yeah. People used to say that pejoratively, but I think that was wrong.
It's not pejoratively, it's actually true. It is the average knowledge of the internet. So which means that where you think you're above average, you do your stuff. Where you think you're below average or you're too bored to bother, you just use the LLM, because like you're at least making index returns in this.
Yep.
So I have a question. I'd kind of bring it down to very practical stuff. So if I'm a peasant trying to use the LLM for some basic coding, okay, and how do I make sure? And I'm not good at it. I'm an ideas guy, but I'm not good at. The reason I never explored coding was I had ideas, but I did not like the whole act of syntax and dealing with all of that. So, but now I have a tool which makes my life easy. But how do I make sure that I'm not being taken for a ride and what I'm getting out of LLM is kosher?
Very interesting question, very important question, because I think, that's a key part of getting value out of LLMs. In that, like, because sometimes LLMs BS a lot. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it, and it's for good reason, because
It's
like,
also a very fun BS, if I might add.
so sometimes it can be fairly fun and things like that. So from there, the problem is that like you need to be able to, there's this nice theorem in computer science that verifying an algorithm is far easier than building an algorithm. For example, if I were to give you a large number and say, very, very large number, and say split it into prime factors, impossible. It's NP hard. It's shown to be NP hard. I mean, if that breaks, I mean, we have a problem in terms of all our cryptography and things like that. But I'm like, here's this number. Here are two factors. Are these factors of this number? Very easy. You just divide or multiply and you immediately have your answer. So which means that at some level with LLMs, all you need to do is to be good at verification and not really good at building things. But you still need to be good at verification, and which means that you need to have the domain knowledge. Which means, for example, like yesterday as part of a client project, I have committed a few thousand lines of code in a language called TypeScript, which I don't know what the syntax even looks like. And it's pretty much a black box. Except that in this particular case, I know the domain. I know the expected output. And I mean, the LLM writes its own tests for the smaller things and all that, but with the expected output, I'm like, I look at the output and say, does this make sense? And then pretty much have a conversation with the LLM to say that, okay, no, this doesn't seem right, change this, change that, and so on. So as long as you know that you can, by looking at the output, you can tell whether it's legit or not. That is good enough.
So in other words, if you have the domain expertise to create use cases and test it out, you're good. You don't have to understand what the code is doing.
You don't necessarily need to. You don't need to understand what each function is doing. I don't think some cases I read all the code. Sometimes I don't. So you don't need to look at all the code. But you need domain knowledge in the sense that you need, yes, as long as it's in your domain, as long as you can look at the output and say confidently whether the output is right or wrong, whether it makes sense or not. Then, so in that sense, the ideal use cases with the LLMs is where you have a very good picture you have a very good big picture, but are not bothered enough or don't know how to construct the small picture. The details is, again, it's a fill tool. The LLM is the fill tool. You say that this is the starting point, this is the end point, plan and go from here to there. It'll do something. Some automated report I was creating as part of some assignment. And I was like, hey, let's add visuals to this report. I had something in mind when I was thinking of visuals. What I had in mind as visuals was very different from what the LLM had in mind as visuals. Right. What does it do as visuals? In the beginning of the report, it says, it makes some graphs saying 100 data points considered, 100 data sources considered of 200 million data points, and all. That was a visual for it. Then I looked at the report. Remember this. I mean, that's very important because a lot of people generate these reports using an LLM and not even look at it. So I looked at the report and I was like, okay, this is BS, change this. Then it understood, okay, this is the kind of visuals you're doing, and it put some visuals. And I was like, no, these visuals are not nice. Here's my data visualization skills. skill, use that and make better visuals. It made it better. Then I was like, you need to do something else and so on. So it is like a iterative process, because I have domain knowledge on the on what I expect, what I want the report to look like. I know exactly what I want the report to look like. So which means that when it produces the report, very quickly I can verify whether it works or not. And then over a period of time, I can give it samples of, like, I've done this as part of some thing where I was like, I wanted to create some graph which looks like somebody else's graph. I kept prompting it saying, okay, make the background beige, make this...
For your weather thing?
For the weather thing.
Okay.
I love those graphs.
Oh, seriously. You stopped at one point and I had to text him. Why did you stop it?
I haven't stopped. Now I've actually built there's a website where it updates itself every single day.
I'll add the link.
I'll give you the link. And as part of the website, I'm also producing an AI generated blog.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Because it has my data visualization skill, my data analysis skill, my writing skill, all of it together. And by the way, I make it write a blog post less than 400 words, because beyond that, it will be like just LLM slop. Yeah. But anyway, so for that weather graphic based on Edward Tuft's canonical New York graphic, I kept saying, okay, make this change, make that change, this line needs to be taller and all those things. Then I was like, okay, let me just point, I forget it was Claude or Codex, but point this to the original graph and say, make it look like it. Brilliant. That was it. Because the moment LLM has a goal, it knows what it's doing. It can self-correct itself. It can iterate by itself until it reaches that goal.
It's relentless.
It's relentless. And so, but some places you cannot accurately define in words what you want. It's like, I know it when I see it, but I can't describe it in words. During those cases, you have to iterate, get it to iterate, then you evaluate the output, give the right kind of feedback and so on. So it's even if it doesn't, you don't need to be a coder to write code anymore. Like, as long as you know whatever the inputs make sense, what outputs make sense, how it goes from here to there, as long as you know that, you're good.
Okay, I want to extend this to another side of using AI, which is sometimes I have a conversation to ideate. For example, even with data. So I may have some data and I would say that I'm trying to find a trend here, and this is how I would have done, generally speaking. Are there other ways to do it? Okay. And sometimes I found very interesting ideas coming in from AI. So how do you kind of put this in this whole analogy of
Fill the gap
kind of a thing? Yeah.
This is not a fill the gap kind of thing. I mean, that's just one use case of LLMs. This is a very different use case you're talking about. Again, another very valuable use case. But again, the thing here is, you give one idea and you ask for, okay, this is how I would analyze this chart. You give me 20 other ways of analyzing this chart. It'll give you. It will be Esther. You need to be able to look at its output and know whether it's BSing or not and where it makes sense. So it'll give you 20 different ideas, of which 3 make sense. You have the domain knowledge to know which 3 make sense, which you're going to implement. So in some sense, you're going a little more high level in some sense in whatever you're doing. The work still needs to be done. Because otherwise it's an average of the reason I built the data visualization skill is because the existing visualizations on LLMs are that an LLM can produce is very, very bad, because the average visualization on the internet is very, very bad.
I've seen your tweets picking apart the...
I used to have a entire blog dedicated to that long back. I shut it down, and now Tumblr also shut down. So
Chat crimes?
On chat crimes. Yeah. So
I just want to go back to the beta angle. So like Sandeep was saying, if it's to the extent that I have understanding of a particular area, now I can just more or less, without thinking too much, I can offload it as long as I can verify the final output. Which is to say that your beta frontier has now kind of expanded. You can sit back and you don't have to do the grunt work. That's one way of thinking about it. The second way of thinking about it is, like, some people who have, for the lack of a better word, good imagination will find it fun, which means now they can extend themselves to other places, they can do more things, they just frees up a lot of space. But for people who are, again, for the lack of a better word, I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but who are one-trick ponies, now beta is gone. There's nothing, which is a very, very disempowering thing. And the third thing is, which means where does the alpha frontier lie? So how do you think about these things?
So okay, let me think through these questions, right? Like, so first thing, is that like every few years there are some professions that just go out of business. If you think about the value of domain knowledge, earlier it was like I know the regulation was a good domain knowledge. Now that's less of a domain knowledge.
There are people who still kind of stake their claims on that.
Yeah, but still, like I mean, the smarter of those start using the available tools to on the I know my regulation, which means that they end up getting much more business because they are able to offer it cheaper, and so the rest of them go out of business. So every few years, well, I think the reason why like a lot of people are like sort of getting a little concerned with the LLMs and taking away jobs is the kind of jobs it's coming for. It's not manual, unskilled jobs that it's coming for.
It's cognitive labor.
It's cognitive labor. Where I would have built a data science team of 15, I'll build a team of 3 or 4 now. The software industry again has figured out that they can do it far fewer engineers to produce the same output than they could earlier. So in that sense, like everywhere. So it's coming to a different segment of the...
This is knowledge workers who had a certain premium of in the labor market.
Yes, now that knowledge worker premium, the average knowledge worker premium is slightly down now. Yeah. And that is sort of causing people to it's
causing jitters.
Causing jitters.
To use your liquidity framework, the bid ask for knowledge workers now widened because...
Exactly. Bid ask for knowledge workers has widened because if you think about it, or rather bid ask, is that the way to think about it? Because
reduced liquidity, no trades.
The thing is that now the knowledge workers also, it's that K-shaped bimodal distribution kind of a thing. Yeah. You have some knowledge workers for whom suddenly the price they can command is much higher, and a bunch of others whose value has gone down, close to zero.
Penny stocks and multi-baggers.
Yes, it's a completely split up. Yes. I was thinking of like milk curdling and like splitting, but like things like that. Now, coming back. So, sorry, Bhuvan,
So, the beta is now gone.
Yeah.
Which means beta, it's not even table stakes, it's there. Like it's one prompt away. Which means if you are like a one-trick pony where beta was the thing that you staked your claim on, now you have nothing.
You need to, I mean, yeah. So what I was coming to is like every few years, some businesses or the other
gets automated away. Yeah.
Which means that those people end up reskilling. Right. I mean, you either reskill or become unemployed. So which means that you use whatever you have as the base, and then based on that kind of figure out how to reskill. And people will do that because I mean, markets will force you to do that. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you will remain unemployed, and which is not a pleasant state to be in. So,
to use your own example, you are saying like if you were to build a company today, you would have hired less people.
Hired less people, fewer people, and hired a very different kind of people.
Right. So, if you are hiring less people, which means now you have a thing, this magical thing which will take care of your beta, which is more or less like the bulk of the day-to-day business. Yes. So, what would be the alpha that you would bring to bear?
Okay, so again a tough one. Yeah. Like the beta, in some sense the hiring decisions I would make differently was that like I was hiring a lot of people for the beta work earlier, and now I would be like the beta work can be done in very little time, or I can use much fewer beta people and hire more people who can help me deliver the alpha and things like that. So that's how alpha work again here is in terms of like, I mean, one of the things a lot of people do now is, for example, like I don't know, probably not in finance, because I in finance definitely, I mean, it's always, all calls have always been recorded. Yes. People just record their calls.
Yeah. They won't even tell you now.
You don't, with tools like Granola and stuff, you don't even need to tell people that you record it. You record the calls, put the transcript to the LLM, and then like get insights on what's happening, which means that, I mean, for me, it's been a cognitive lifesaver. It's like, because otherwise I'll be like furiously making notes while talking to somebody and things like that. So it's but anyway, so but still getting that alpha from, okay, this is what the customer wants. How do I deliver it to them? Still alpha. This is what 100 customers have asked me for. How do I design the product so that it can serve most of their needs? Still alpha. What should the algo look like? Not the minute algo in terms of, but the high level algo. What should the high level algo look like? How do I put in these components? See, the LLMs, all the components are in place now. Yeah. Now, it's not as simple as 40% of my money in this fund, 30% in that fund, and so on. It's not, integrating it is still an art. So that still is like how you do that is still alpha. So I mean, broadly, that's how I think about this.
Just a little follow-up. So there's this professor at University of Chicago I follow. So he said something like, so when LLMs came on the scene, like there was a moment where he felt disillusioned, saying that, shit, it's all over now. Yeah. Then he kind of quickly recovered from the trough of disillusionment to figure out how empowering this is. Like, as you were going through this process of making sense of these things, using them, putting them to work, figuring out your own worldview, like, was it like a similar journey for you? Did they kind of make you feel disempowered at any point?
Actually not. At least for me, for most of the time, it was like, hey, I can do much more than I could earlier. Most of the time. There was a time, now, if you look at it from the point of view of, from some places, like for example, jobs, for example, like the way jobs are described now is very different from they were a few years ago. At least in the better companies. Some companies which still like kind of require the same set of skills that you did need 5 years back, and like they've not evolved yet. So certain sectors are like that. Others have moved ahead and so on. So in that sense, I'm like, okay.
Disempowered. Yeah.
That's okay.
I've never been disempowered by LLMs. I've always been like, hey, this kid can do this new cool thing. Because it's already doing this cool thing, what more can I do? Because it's already doing this. So it has never been like, oh, it's doing this thing that I was so good at. Because LLMs are now, like, for example, taking an example, right? Like, I mean, one of the things I've always prided myself on is data visualization. In that, because I always considered myself to be fairly good at it. And I remember in the past, I would have spent one entire work day getting one graph completely perfect and things like that. I've done this several times. Now LLMs can build that graph. I even like several people have put their skills in the public domain because like so that everybody can do this and so on. So now that alpha is gone. But still, knowing that once the LLM has made this graph, is it what I needed? What tweaks do I need to make and so on? That's still my IP.
It's an annoying word, but taste.
Yeah, that's
And you can
taste.
spend a lot more time on that now, on refining it, yeah.
I refine it and give it back to it. And earlier I would be like, okay, how do I move this label to not overlap with that label and so on?
And the story that the picture tells you can spend more time on making that.
You to spend more time on the story
than getting that bar right or the label right.
Exactly. So which means that like for people who are able to use the LLMs well, now suddenly you find yourself being able to move up the value chain, do much more of what you want to do than earlier.
Yeah, like in my head, I imagine Edward Scissorhands. Like you have all the tools in your hand. Now you can just do multiple things at the.
I want to continue from there. So you said people who can use LLMs well.
Yep.
Okay. So
big if.
Yeah. How do people who are still trying to make sense of this tool, how can they kind of make sure that they don't make mistakes in this journey of using the LLM well? What would you say to people? And how there's also other thing, at least in my space, which is trading. What happens is there are a lot of these snake oil sellers who would come up with things like, for 50,000 rupees. In 2 hours session, I'll teach you how to use AI to trade better and shit like that. Yep. So there are two questions. One is, as a novice, how do I get better at using these tools and make my life or work better? Two, how do I smell bullshit and be, safe with that?
Okay. First one, answer is very, very simple. Just use it a lot. Just use it a lot. You will learn for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe what does use it a lot mean?
For example, what happens when you'll be like, oh, this is a nice chatbot. I can ask it for the weather. I can ask it to count the number of hours in Strawberry and things like that. I can ask it what is 2 plus 2 and all those things. You start with all those toy examples. Okay. Now suddenly you're like, hey, I'm on this podcast tomorrow. The host has sent me this list of questions. Help me prepare.
Did you do that?
I did that. I did that, but the answer was too long, so I didn't bother reading it. And then I'll be like, okay, I need to send a proposal to this client. This is the recording of the last call. In this folder, I have put all my consulting notes on how I approach and so on. Build a proposal. That's that.
Brilliant.
So you start thinking about anything that you're doing, any work that you can do using a computer. Don't go beyond that. You'll be like, okay, what if I were to use an LLM for this? You start with the curiosity of what if I were to use an LLM for it, knowing fully well that you need not accept what it tells. And if you start with things that are in your domain in some sense, you'll be able to evaluate what it's good at, what it's bad at. And over a period of time, that domain expands. Like I told you, I pushed a few thousand lines of TypeScript code yesterday. It's a language I've never written any manual code in. Absolutely never. I've built a few iOS apps. Something I would have considered way beyond me 2 years ago. Because it's like, and all this has come because I've used it and it builds up gradually. You don't wake up one day and go from asking random questions to ChatGPT to say that, hey, build me a arbitrage model for the 1 week and 2 week expiry options in India and things like that. That's a great, by the way, speaking of which, the arbitrage, one of the things is that like, All traders can be quants because now what separates quant traders from, 15 years since I've been a quant, but quants can write code, they can analyze data and based on that find signals and then based on that put trades and things like that. What if you were to have a magical thing that would keep popping up signals to you without you having to do that much work to set up the system because you're not a software engineer, you're a finance guy. Now suddenly you're like, hey, let me build a trading system which will give me signals when this particular pair of options is mispriced or something like that. It would have taken a lot of effort earlier. It enough effort that most traders would have been like, okay, this is way beyond me. I'm not even going to bother on this one.
But I was one of those people.
Now they're like, just start by building a basic model. Build a model based on I don't know, a bit old-fashioned, but I'll say that Nifty this month versus Nifty next month kind of a thing. When there's this kind of a pattern, you give me this alert. Easy to build. I mean, in theory, it's easy to build a piece of code, but in practice, not so easy. Yes. Now, you just ask your ChatGPT or Claude to write that code for you. It will do that. It will figure out where to get the data from, where to get your. It'll ask you for some Bloomberg or something API to pull your live data and stuff, and it'll build that. But still, it's your decision to trade on that. Right. ChatGPT is not going to make you money. It's going to help you make money.
How dare you? There are people who are saying that ChatGPT make money. Make no mistake.
Fine. I mean, you can use that. But then the beautiful thing is that here we are in the trading domain.
Yeah.
If you use ChatGPT to make money, make no mistake, you can get that prompted, get some strategies. The market will teach you whether you're right or wrong.
Yeah.
So similarly, like how the market teaches you whether you're right or wrong. Because if you're wrong, you lose money, and then you need to change your the thing. It's similar with your relationship with the LLM. Yes. You experiment with it, you use it for random things. Yes. So soon you'll start developing an idea of what it is good at, what it is not.
You'll start seeing patterns.
Or rather, not what it is good at, what it is not. Where is it useful to me and where is it is not. And now, knowing where it is useful to you, you try more things where it's useful to you. It's like reinforcement learning over there. You look at it in that kind of in that direction and then just expand.
I mean, I don't know where I heard this line. It's a thought-shaped tool. I always found it like a useful heuristic to think about this.
I find it difficult to wrap my head around it. So
just a hypothetical question on the finance bit. So because you understand finance, one of the rare people who understand. So I have this dumb theory, which is to say that if you know what you're doing, especially when it comes to trading or investing, automating and being systematic is much better than doing discretionary.
Absolutely.
Which is to say that now, like you mentioned, everybody is a quant now. Yep. The fact that we don't have a lot of people who understand finance, let's set aside that problem for a bit. Let's assume that people have a fair understanding, which is now everybody can start creating their own systematic instantiations of their trading or investment strategies. Now, my pet theory is this will make the markets more efficient.
Yes, it will.
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't think of it any other way. Of course, it will make it more efficient because more people becoming quants means that more arbitrage is being arbitraged out.
But then, while in theory it makes perfect sense, but is this curve, will it play out in a year, or it would take its own time to play out?
It's very difficult to talk about timelines when it comes to LLMs because the rate at which things have been progressing, you don't know what to expect. You just need to be okay, technologies are continuously getting better and I need to figure out how to use it. But there's a downside to it as well, which is the cost. See, think about it. Like we were talking about, it's like linear algebra on steroids. Yeah. Which means that this linear algebra has to happen on some computer somewhere, which incurs a cost. Yeah. The computer has to be built, the chip has to be built, you need electricity to power it and all those kind of things. Yeah. In the last couple of months, we've seen the cost sort of getting real because look at Twitter, a lot of people complaining about how Claude is suddenly cutting its token limits.
The subsidy is over.
So as the subsidy comes down, I mean, the good thing is that the open source models, open weight models are still getting better.
I'm being pleasantly surprised by how good the Chinese models are.
Yes, they've been getting better, which means that that puts a cap on how much money OpenAI or Anthropic can make of their models and things like that.
That's a market maker in this analogy.
That's a market maker, exactly. Except somewhere I saw that I don't know if it's Quen or DeepSeek or somewhere, they've revamped their team and they're planning to make more proprietary models now. Quen, I think. Yes. Yeah. Llama is dead. Facebook is now making proprietary models. So, which means that, obviously, that open weights models exist means that new people will keep building them.
Wouldn't the infrastructure cost also go down over a period of time?
Infrastructure cost will go down over a period of time. But as the models get better, I don't think they're becoming better by becoming more efficient. They're becoming better by you're throwing more computer data and things like that. It says, oh, the Claude now has 1 million contexts, but that still means a lot more computation that it
That
can.
much in hardware for that to
It
run.
needs that much more. Recently there's been this thing, no, like the Uber CFO said that they've spent their entire year's budget in 4 months. Microsoft is starting to cut down on cloud licenses and things like that because people are seeing that the cost is starting to get real. So it's like, see, it's going to be like yet another tool. There is going to be a clearing price for it and things like that. And at that clearing price, there will be some use cases which will be more useful than not. Some companies will use it more than not because others will find it cheaper to throw bodies at a problem rather than getting an LLM to do this. But so it depends on the use cases and things like that.
The other cost that I kind of keep thinking about is, so people are worried that, there are concerns about over-reliance on AI, which is to say that, of course, you have the subscription cost.
Yeah.
Now there's a cognitive cost.
Yes.
Where do you draw that line in terms of offloading your judgment, your taste? Like, if you offload, let's say, for example, now you don't code.
Yes.
I'm assuming. Earlier you used to write a program on some date. Now you're just offloading it to this thing. Does that mean your cognitive knife, so to speak, is getting duller? Like, does that worry you? How do you think about this problem?
It's interesting. Someday I decided, like, okay, let me make this graph from first principles. Okay. I'm not using any LLMs. Let me hand code it. Right. I started writing it and I got bored. Very quickly, in 10 minutes, I got bored and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And I quickly called Claude and got it done. Now, it's a real problem more at the organizational level than at the personal level. Because personal level, what happens is that you start using LLMs for your work. You're still inspecting, you're still occasionally looking at the code, you're still looking at the outputs and so on. Occasionally looking at the code. But still that occasionally keeps you sharp enough that like you don't become over-reliant on it. Like you still it's a tool that's not, nobody is going to say that, hey, we are becoming over-reliant on Excel or we are becoming over-reliant on calculators, going 1 or 2 generations. It's like you had calculators, you had Excel, now you have, I mean, it's exactly the same, it's part of the same progression in some sense. Right. So some reliance is fine. At the individual level, you will never be like sort of over-reliant and things like that. At the organizational level, you can be, because what will happen, again, this is comes back to the alpha beta thing. It will be like, hey, customer service is just a bunch of chatbots. Instead of having humans sitting there, we can get an LLM to do it. Like, I'm just taking this one popular example, but like,
it is a very real one.
Like fire the entire team, like get a bunch of LLMs. Now the business evolves, new kinds of questions come up. Now suddenly you need alpha to kind of deal with the problem. LLMs are all beta. They don't know how to deal with this particular problem, and then like suddenly you're like, okay, where's that knowledge on how do you solve this problem? So at the institutional level, it's extremely important that like you kind of, even if you find that there's a particular line of business where, hey, maybe I can automate away 100% of the people. It's bad on 2 counts. One is in terms of like this whole, you lose this institutional knowledge on how to do this. Yeah. Second is automating 100% is several orders of magnitude more complex than automating 99%. Yeah. So, which means that you would rather keep it at the 99% of automation than the 100% of automation kind of a thing. I mean, it is both at the institutional level, this thing of things, skills atrophying at the company level and all that is absolutely a real risk. Individual level, less so. Though, I mean, my wife says that I now, you use Whisperflow too much and you're used to talking to LLMs a lot. So because of that, like you're not concise in your conversation. It's a very fair, very fair statement to make. So
2 things, okay? Sorry.
No, go on.
So, one, because you spoke about Whisperflow, voice to text has made my use of LLMs better because now I'm able to give far more context without having to put the physical effort of typing it in. Correct. So now the prompts are like 10x larger, doesn't matter, but I'm able to give more nuanced context to LLM, and that has made my life better as far as usage is concerned. But the other point which I wanted to talk about is, so now in this age of LLM, when we talk about developing, for the lack of a better word, taste or a better sense of a space, how do you use LLM to do that, or LLM may not be the way to do that? How do you kind of, because that's the alpha, the way I understand, it's not really getting the job done because LLM is able to do that. So the skill is kind of a more meta skill. So how do you kind of put the use of LLM to get to that meta skill if someone is
how do you get to that meta skill is like by starting, like it's the same answer to something I mentioned a few minutes back, which is that like you start using the LLMs to do whatever you're doing. Find out what it's good at, what's not good at, where it's useful to you, where it's not useful to you. Now, how do I compound where it's useful to me? Now that it's useful to me in this manner, what more can I do? How can I spend my time better? It will have to be an organic process. I mean, I'm not somebody. I mean, I won't say that, hey, I'll do this one day workshop which will get you automatically good at LLMs and things like that.
I thought I would attend it.
I do workshops.
There
I
is
do
a
workshops.
large market for it. You can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Being a course seller in
Yeah.
2026 is a growth market.
It's a growth market.
No, I'm only joking.
No, I think it's because like whenever there's a new technology that comes, anyone who's trying to teach other people the technology, like in the short term they'll make some alpha, gets upped out, very quickly gets upped out. So
Also, there's a, I mean, it'll be a little insulting, but those who can't do teach.
Yeah, that's also there.
So, I mean, like no conversation about AI is, it's complete without the jobs question. Because you've been on the both the sides of the job market. Yes. You looked for a job, you've been in a position where you hired people. And like when you think about what LLMs can do, and they're very real because you put them to work every single day. How do you think about their impact on the labor market? Does that worry you?
at some level, yes, because like we mentioned, like the people who are doing the beta jobs, there'll be fewer of them to go around.
That's the entire Indian economy, by the way.
Yes, the beta jobs, there are fewer beta jobs to go around. So which means that if you're not scaling up to alpha, you have a problem. If you're a company which is just offering a beta service, you have a problem because some other company has figured out how to offer this beta service at a much cheaper cost.
Beta product is the next model upgrade.
Your beta, I don't know what model upgrade. Model upgrade is not uniform, right? Like there are certain things where they're like much better at, they've gotten much better at, and certain things much less better at, and so on. That's fine.
Because I'm genuinely concerned about. I don't have this doom and gloom saying that all jobs will get. Because I'm worried we are in a very bottom rung as an economy. We are in the body shopping business, and all bodies are essentially beta. I'm genuinely concerned. Okay, dude, where is this going?
So that for the Indian economy, it is a concern in the sense that a lot of jobs that have existed may not exist, or rather they'll exist in much lower numbers. Yeah. So you need to think about. So the question is, but you still have a lot of people who are trained in a lot of things and things like that. Right. Pretty sure
we'll all become carpenters.
Something they'll. I mean, as a market over a period of time, there will be disruption, but we'll figure a way out over a period of time. What we should not do is to kind of indulge in some kind of premature legislation and things like that. Like for example, recently Apple announced its new iOS and its Siri models, and Siri will be available everywhere except Europe and China.
Oh, nice.
Because they cannot offer it in China because the Gemini is not available in China. Yeah. And Europe, the regulations mean that the GDPR and all those things mean that they cannot offer it there. You don't want to be in Europe's place there.
You've spoken about it in bits and pieces. Like how do you go about using it itself? Like what are some of your, for the lack of a better, unique workflows in terms of how you use? The reason why I ask it is, like at least in my limited experience when I'm interacting with people, they still ask the question, okay, what model do I use? What is AI? So on and so forth. Yep. Like in terms of how you concretely, like what are, let's say, 3-4 regular use cases that give a sense of people on how to approach this thing?
Regular use case. For example, I'll talk about use cases that are more repeatable across people rather than my alpha kind of a thing. By the way, I recently, the last couple of months, I've switched from using web or app-based models into using code-based models. I use Claude Code and Codex. The whole idea there is that like they work on specific code folders on the computer, which means that all the context required is already there in that folder, and they can look that up whenever required. Yeah. So, for example, I have a folder called Consulting, which is for my consulting business. I use a granola-like tool to record all my conversations. I've stopped telling people that I'm recording them. I record all my conversations. It transcribes all the conversations. It goes into this conversation folder. A whole bunch of notes in terms of my thoughts on what the business is like, what the market is like, articles, all of them go into the same folder. And there'll be a periodic pass where it'll like kind of get insights. There's a bunch of documents I have, which is in terms of like pricing document, workflow structuring document, like my pitch document and things like that. Periodically, I run Codex on this to update these documents and so on. So now the thing is this. I have all the conversations, I have all my material, there might be external material that's useful. I put everything there. Which means that like, let's say I have a conversation with somebody and they're like, hey, can you send me a quote for this work by tomorrow? Now I have a sort of in some sense, a kind of a pricing skill here, which kind of like, which I can use to say that this is the scope of work, this is the company, how should I price this engagement?
It's your butler, you can tell it, go fetch.
Sometimes it's very, for me it's very useful because I'll be like, for some assignment, I'll be like, hey, maybe I should charge maybe 3 lakhs is a fair price. I ask Codex with all the knowledge it has, like, you should be charging 8 lakhs for this. And then I end up settling at 6 lakhs.
Alpha.
Also because like these are things where you sometimes end up underpricing yourself, especially in a freelance consulting mode that I am in. And there it tells you what to charge for and things like that, which is interesting. And similarly, things like I would have had an exploratory conversation with the company and like, is there a scope for me to offer consulting service to these guys? If so, what my pitch should be? It's able to do something and so on. So on the consulting front, these are some of the workflows that I've set up and things like that. Another thing, for example, is like I'm very forgetful. And there are things that I want to do, which I want to do. I'll be like, okay, on my way home today, I want to just stop over and buy coffee filter paper. I would have thought about that. Now, or rather, I think about that early in the morning. So I'll be like, okay, so I have this, I've said like an OpenClaw Hermes, those things. I have a server where I run these things, which I communicate with on Telegram. I'm like, remind me at 12:30 to buy coffee filter paper. It like is much better. I mean, Siri was supposed to do it, but it doesn't. So I end up using this and things like that. It does a good job. Or I built another app. I mean, it's a private, which is to kind of where to catch all my thoughts, because I'll be thinking about some pensive.
Yeah.
Have I publicized it? I've forgotten.
It was on your GitHub.
Speaking of GitHub, for the first time in 25 years, I'm enjoying writing code, because I learned coding in school where it was C, C++. You can remember the entire syntax in your head and you can just churn out code and get things out. Then you go to college, you start learning Java, and which is like, it's just so voluminous. And then the whole software engineering process is so laborious that you lose your entire sort of interest in coding. But now, because of LLMs, they take care of all the laborious part of figuring out the syntax, figuring out the structure, figuring out how to read somebody else's code, which is much harder than writing code.
Bigger pain than writing your own code. Yeah.
Now I can just point it to a repo and say that, like, get me the relevant insights from this for the work that I'm doing and things like that. So for the first time ever, I'm like absolutely enjoying coding. I work in data science, which means that like using AI for my coding is like a very, very normal use case for me. So you were asking me about where I'm using AI. I told you about the consulting folder that I have. Then I have this tasks, reminders. It has access to my email and WhatsApp, so it gives me a morning digest on these are the people you need to follow up with today and things like that.
You outsourced your life.
and yesterday, my wife told me, okay, I've made fun of you for this, but I think for the first time, I can see that these tools are making you a better husband.
Oh, wow.
Because she had told me on Sunday night that on Monday morning, can you help me with this? Right. At Monday morning, 9:30, I go to her and say that, okay, I did this. What do you want to do? And she's like, for the first time, you remembered. That's because it was on Hermes. Hermes popped up a reminder at 9 o'clock, and then like using it was some LLM work, but I did it. So I also use LLMs to write, but not in the way that other people do.
That was my next question, because I remember this was some months ago. You had published a post with it was LLM assisted or something like that.
No. So I have built a very large volume of writing in public domain, like some 3,000 blog posts, a book, some 250 articles in newspapers and things like that. I fed a bunch of it to Claude a few months ago and said, create a skill to write like me. It created a skill. That's when I wrote that blog post saying, by the way, my blog lost 50 subscribers on the day I put that post saying that I've taught Claude how to write like me. Because people assume that it's going to become yet another LLM written blog, I think. So I lost, I have some 2,000 odd subscribers. I lost 50 subscribers on that one day.
People are very opinionated when it comes to LLM assistants.
But my personal blogs, entirely self-written. I even tried writing using Whisperflow, and I found that like it was inefficient because I write while thinking, and the pace of typing is the optimal one. Writing by hand is too slow, speaking is too fast. Typing is the optimal one to think while writing.
So I've gone entire side. I used to write by hand, now I've gone completely voice writing.
Completely, okay. I have never gotten into voice writing.
I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
So I keep the voice writing as my, it's like a dump. Right. And I refine based on that dump. Yeah. So that's not the final output.
Yeah. That's not so. But now I'm in the process of starting a few LLM written blogs, because it has my writing skill, data analysis skill. These are all data blogs. One is on weather. I mean, like when people see the link down, they'll know where to find the blog. I need to start populating it. I can trigger that blog using Hermes. By the way, I can speak into Hermes, into my Telegram, saying that about some question, is June unusually hot this year in Bangalore, and it'll produce a blog post there. So it's like it can do that. But again, I limited it to 400 words because beyond that it'll go into slop. And I use it for proposals, for example, where it need to look formal and all those things. Nobody enjoys the process of formal writing. Writing is enjoyable, formal writing is not. But still, it's important that you read what it's written. To 2008, I was working in one of India's earliest high-frequency trading firms. And back then, the regulations were such that, like, if you are sending an algorithmic order to the market, NSE or SEBI or someone needs to audit the algo. But there's a loophole, which is called one-touch DMA, which is you send it to the broker, and they have a guy who, I mean, his job is to serve all the algorithmic clients. He'll be hitting this button all the time. So because you have routed the order to the market through the broker and he has touched it,
Doesn't count as an algo.
Doesn't count as an algo.
Wow.
But of course, the latency kills you. I mean, we initially embraced it, but the latency completely killed us. None of our, we used to do these triangle arbitrages and stuff, and none of them closed, and we then pivoted into another kind of arbitrage and so on. But in some sense, if you think about AI-generated content and things like that, if it is one touch, it's fine. So AI has generated something. I read recently, like for a conference, I was proposing a talk. I sent one paragraph. They came back with a format with 20 different questions and said that fill up all of this. Go back to Codex, give it the questions, give it the gist of my talk, what I had proposed. It has my consulting folder. It gave the answers. I read through it. I think about 90% it was fine. So there were some sentences which were, and it has my writing skill, by the way. So which means that it writes like me. So I probably spent 5 minutes editing it and then sent it, and they seemed fairly happy with it. So I had done that one touch because I had edited. So I think, yeah, using LLMs for writing, as long as you have that one touch, which is that you read something before you put it out, you're okay. If you read something and still put out LLM slop, that's your problem. It's not the LLM's problem. Yeah, your readers will stop reading you. That's the risk you. But yeah.
That's it.
Cool. I think that's good.
This was
Great.
This is absolutely fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I don't even know what.
No, this is all good. Nothing to edit. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you for spending time with us. Hope to have you with us again sometime.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure talking to you.